Um, Good afternoon. Can you tell us, I'm Marie Converse, and we're doing interviews for the Women's Club Project, the Oral History Project. And this is in November of 1992. And tell us who you are and where you live and something about your early life here.
Well, my name is Jane Herron, and I'm currently living at 701 2nd Avenue in New Cumberland, which is the family homestead.
When was the house built?
The exact date I do not know. It had to be around the turn of the century because my father built it himself with help. He was a carpenter. He built it before he married, purposely for his bride. And that's why I live in a 15-room house and try to keep it up, because it sort of means something to you after that length of time,
sure.
when no other family has lived in it.
Right.
And as long as I can financially do that, it doesn't look too bad. I keep it up fairly well. But it had to be around the turn of the century, because it was either 1902 or 3 that he was married.
How many children were there?
Just the two, one sister and myself. Very small family.
What was New Cumberland like when you're in your earliest memories?
I don't think in your earliest memories you even try to think about a place. It's just there. You don't really identify. I have the home has always been called a hotel because there were always so many people there, and yet there were so few of us. But we never knew how many we were going to have, and that brought a lot of food into the place, and there was more trade in our family. For I can recall that Saturday night trip took you down to the stores to pay your bills, but they delivered everything then. And it was nothing for her to be served, my mother to be serving 22 people at a meal.
Really? Where did you find all these people?
They flocked. The early memories, and this took place even before I was born. My sister was older. But that was at the time that the damn old US 9 was under construction here.
I see.
And all the engineers had to stay locally because the roads were not so that they could travel, or they didn't have any transportation of it anyway. And so they stayed in different homes around.
I see.
And then one or two of them twisted arms to try and get to live, to be with us. And those two would bring 2 more, and that those 2 would bring 2 more. And it ended up that she would have 14 or 15 regulars every day during the construction of that US Dam 9. And then it just kept on. When those people left here, and this is an interesting fact, that I wish the world were a little bit more like it today. They kept in touch. They would bring their wives back. They would keep in touch. Usually they were young engineers just out of college who were working on it. And it was in World War II that we lost track of the last of it.
Now, about when was that first dam built? Was it the first dam?
It would be the first. And I'm very poor on actual dates. But it was quite a few years under construction. And I recall them telling me at the house that my mother had maid service and was serving all these meals to people while she was pregnant for me. Now, my sister was 4 years older. And she told them that they would have to leave for a while. And they said, well, they'd be back. And as soon as she was able, they were back. And so that would, I think some records show that it was, whether it was dedicated or what, in 13. Is that? But, of course, before that, well, see, I was born in 1908. And so they were working on it before that.
So before that dam was built, the river was very small.
No, it looked almost just as big as it was now.
Oh.
And it was traveled, but it couldn't, it had longer periods of time when it couldn't be traveled.
I see.
Because of the ice or when the would get too low. But it was still, the ships were on it because that was the only way that there was anything brought into town. It all came by river.
So the road system wasn't developed at
No.
that point. Okay.
And when the town started, even the railroads were in it. It was all by water.
Okay. So the river was very important to us.
Oh, yes.
Now, where did you go to school?
Locally here.
And
because I fooled the teachers and graduated too young from the high school, on signing up for a teaching course, which at that time, 2-year, gave you a standard exam, which is, I was following the pattern of Rowena, my sister. I was signed up, and they said, well, you must go 4 years. You know, the family cannot finance that at the present time, which was true. Oh, but what are you going to do when you are finished the 2 years? Look at the school, of course. No, you're not. You won't be old enough. Okay, then I will not teach. That ended it.
so is that when you went into accounting?
No, I did quite a few things and various times. But then I went to the Mon Power and was there for a few years. Got the opportunity to move into headquarters working with the traveling auditors and training accounting. And that was before computerization, where every little town had its office girl, and believe me, they had a job because it was a lot of different operations to try to meld into a day's operation.
Now, how did you travel at that time?
In my own wheels.
In your own car? And
I wouldn't take a company car because then I couldn't have any privacy at nighttime. If that car were anywhere.
Now, do you remember going to school as a little girl with your sister?
Yeah. No, I was always so independent. I always went myself.
Okay. Now, where did you walk to school?
Oh, yes. And walk home at noontime and walk back. And usually, according to all reports that the family got, it took about 3 trips for me to get there. Because I would walk one direction for a while and then go the other direction for a while. Then go back again. But it's still, I would get there in the same time as somebody else going the same steady pace.
A very busy little girl. Now, where was the school? Was it the school that they called Gravel Hill?
Gravel Hill Academy.
How did that name happen, do you think?
I really don't know, except that the hill was always very stony.
Did everybody call it that?
I think old pictures even show it that.
It's a Gravel Hill Academy.
And that, of course, dates back to before I knew it any. But and it had all the grades in the high school and everything at the same building.
Now, how many people would be in a class? Would you have separate classes?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, Ann Shutter was my first grade teacher.
It's interesting that people can always remember their first grade teacher.
Oh, I think I could remember every one of them.
Really?
Oh, yes. It didn't matter at all. Some of them liked me and some didn't.
Being a busy little girl, I'll bet you were a handful.
We won't go into that.
Okay. Well, now, tell me, do you have any early memories of Ridge Avenue or who you played with, who you went to school with?
I had one particular friend, I don't recall what year it was. I know it continued for several years. That was, the last name was Bishop. And the father was the manager of the old New Cumberland glass plant.
The glass plant. Is this the glass house?
I don't know of any other
Okay.
but I never heard it called the glass house.
Okay. And the glass plant. Okay.
But I don't even recall its correct name. But one daughter, they lived in a brick home that was down by the plant. And we were together almost constantly. Those people left here and started that Huntington plant. What was that? Blanco?
Blanco. Oh, Blanco glass. Oh, that's very famous.
Yes. Well, those were the Bishops.
Okay,
And
Bishops.
she and Carolyn and I used to spend our time after school. This is when we were in grade school somewhere. But we would go right into the factory, and if they weren't busy, the workers would blow us different trinkets, with glass. We'd play with them for a while, and they would tell us, well, to just throw them back on the glass pile when you're through, and they could reuse them again sometime. Wish we had kept some of those. They'd be priceless.
Yeah. Wonderful.
But we didn't, because it was just an everyday occurrence. I heard from her for quite some time after they left here. They were here for a number of years, but I think the whole family's gone now.
So we had the glass works and, of course, all the brickyards. I remember the kilns.
Yes. I think there were about 7 of those right along here. That's where we got the term for the Brickyard Bend Festival, was from that idea.
The riverboat captains could see
The bend in the river.
at night.
And they supposedly gave it its name, Brickyard Bend, because of that. But all produce and everything, according to what I understand from people, came in by boat. And also some of the workers. That's where we got the term, the hoopy.
What would that have meant?
That's a hoop hauler.
A hoop?
That originated.
They paid bills. Tell me about how town was.
Well, it was quite busy. That was downtown night, more or less. And that's about the only time that I saw the downtown part. And that was always at nighttime. The stores were open quite late.
And what kind of stores were there?
Well, there was, I'm wondering if I have the right information. I think it was called Porter Evans, a large, supposedly, department store. And it was somewhere down close to in fact, those buildings are no longer there. I think it was in that block where the finance office and the veterans and all, somewhere in there. And of course the People's Store was the big one on up, but we did not walk up there, as I recall, because it was enough the other way for youngsters. But the family would go downtown on a Saturday evening. And
Graham's store, was it on the corner there?
No, that was the bank.
Oh, okay. All right.
That was the bank up until, I don't recall the date, but up until it.
Now that was the bank and the post office then, wasn't it?
No.
No.
No, the post office, I have no idea where it was originally. I don't think it was in there.
And was there a drugstore?
I didn't have much association with drugstores all my life, so I don't know.
I think in terms of ice cream cones.
Oh yes, but it was up on the ridge. That was McFadden.
McFadden's? And that's where you went to get ice cream cones?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But downtown, that, I don't know who the porter was, but the Evans in that was Bert Evans.
Okay, Bert Evans.
I think should be asked.
Okay.
They had an elevator.
Oh, we did.
It was a freight elevator. And the People Store was the first indication of the cashier being up on a second floor of the building with these carriers taking the little money box, little carrier and the bill. Those two things, those were outstanding at that time to a very small child.
Yes.
The telephone office was somewhere close to that Porter Evans building, but I don't recall exactly where. And the operators were on the second floor of it. I know that because I recall them talking about the floods that they would stay up there and work as long as it was possible.
Do you remember some of the early floods at all? I can remember the 36 flood very vividly.
Oh, yes, but I don't really recall. I should have been able to the 1913 flood, but it didn't have any bearing to me because I was up
on the ridge.
Away from it. But the rest of them were almost nuisance floods in comparison until the big 36 flood.
That 36 flood was really something.
Oh, yes. Everywhere.
Everywhere. Our house had 4 feet 8 inches in the first floor. And I can
Well, there was 5 foot in the second floor on the homes down here on Chester Street.
Really? 5 feet.
And in what is the Turley Funeral Home, the Beaumonts still lived there. And they had I think their first floor ceilings are 12 foot. And the water reached, lapped against the ceiling of the first floor. There.
That's just amazing. Oh. I can still remember the smell of the mud after the water went down. It's just something you never forget.
And you cannot get rid of it entirely.
No.
It just takes ages and ages. But I was never in one, but we always had a lot of refugees.
At your house?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Because down in the valley below us, the backwaters would come in there. And Maud Cullen and various ones whose homes were underwater would often be at our place.
When you say the valley, Eden Valley, that would fill up with water.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Gosh, that would really be something. Now, tell me, if you went away to work, but you came home on weekends as much as you
Usually.
could.
Lots of times I was there every weekend, or every 2 weekends, something of the sort.
Tell us about the kinds of changes that began to happen. After the railroad was built, and then, of course, the road was built.
That, of course, was long before I started anything in traveling. But
when you were driving on Old Route 2, that was still a pretty curvy road.
Well, I quit driving before the interstates. That is, I quit traveling that way before the interstates. But the railroad, of course, was in here. I don't remember when it wasn't,
Okay.
but recall hearing everybody telling about all the produce having to come by rail or by boat before that time. And then when they opened up the railroads, that gave, but still, it was years before the truckers started bringing in produce.
Okay, so the railroad brought in.
After the railroads came in here, and of course there was passenger service. That used to be quite heavy.
Now, when you would come home over the years, how did New Cumberland change?
Because I came home so frequently, it was almost like you were still here, and you don't notice those changes so much. The main trouble, the main thing that you noticed more was when some of the people would no longer be there. But as far as the actual town itself, since you came in as frequently as I did, because I didn't have any permanent place in, I lived in hotels and motels all the time, and so I just got in the car and came home over the weekends and would go back again, maybe 300 miles for the next week's job or something of that sort.
Oh, my goodness.
But that way you would see everything looked familiar. It wasn't like you were going to be away for several months at a time and not seeing. Do you follow? How it's hard to describe, because when you are with a thing very much, you don't notice that change. But you began to notice the number of people that were no longer around.
Now, is that because they moved away?
No, when there were some of the, well, the younger group probably did. One of the strange, and you say you can.
Okay. Over the years, there have been changes, and a lot of people have gone away, but we've still been able to retain a lot of the big old houses. I understand that you had a great deal to do with the development of the high-rise. Now, how did you get involved in that? If you were, had you been still traveling when you were doing that, or how did that happen?
I believe I was back here then. I think it is only about 10 years old, am I correct? I think Hancock House is about 10 years old, so I would have been back here. And we formed a committee trying to get a senior housing of some sort. It was just after I had started this place.
Now, how did you decide to start this place then? Let's start with that. You came back here. And
I was back here in the Weirton office with the power company for a year's time as accounting supervisor. There were two of us working the job. And it was then, at that time, compulsory retirement at 65.
I see.
And I told them that I had no intention of retiring. I'd get out of their place, but that was all right. And so I was looking around for a little bit of something to do. And I heard they were going to federally start, because West Virginia had, up at that time, they had about 50 of the 55 counties that had centers funded through the Older Americans Act to start senior centers. So I said, I would like some part-time work in that. I can plug a typewriter and I can answer phones and all this and that. So I would apply for it, which I did. I received a call from Wheeling, because at that time it was starting from that area. And they were telling me that they had hired a director for here, that they had not taken, they had hired a stenographer for here, or secretary, or whatever they were going to call it. But they had not chosen me, and I said, well, that's fine. This came over the phone to me. It didn't matter. And they said, oh, but don't hang up. We've decided that we want you to be the director of it. Who decided? Well, I never did hear. I think they thought I might hold it against them the rest of my life. I don't know. And so I was to meet somebody up here. There was no furniture in this place. There was not a stick of furniture. There was 3 years of dust. But I was to meet them up here. That was when the building was over there where the road is. And I came up. It sounded all right. And I started. And we chartered in 1976.
In 76.
And but back to Hancock House, we had about 2 years of trying to work on this to get it. And weren't getting very far to achieve the actual money. And then we got Bob Mollahan interested in it. Mm-hmm. And he and I had a standing joke for a while. He still, when I see him over in Morgantown, he'll say, 110 is a lot better than 50, because the federal people said that the area could only accommodate 50 units. That was what they were willing to fund, 50 units. He wasn't interested in it. It had to be more than that to be effective. And that is all we were told we could have. And he still, the last time I was talking to him, would say 110 is a lot better than 50. And we got the 110 units.
You got 110.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had to have 110 people to get federal funding. Is that the idea?
No. Those are units.
Units.
Those are the apartments.
I see. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And no, they were only going to fund for 50 in this locality, mm-hmm. because that was all that the area would stand. But we finally got word that if we had some specs into Charleston tomorrow morning, that's the way it came, fine, we'll do that. We had them there. We called. We already had the contractor who had plenty of specs. Whether the ones he would use or not didn't matter. But he was in Cambridge. We got a hold of him. He got down, had them there waiting at the door for them, and we got the 110 units.
Gosh.
And they're beautiful.
They are. I've been there. That's just outstanding.
Yeah.
That's been a real help, I think, for this whole area. Now tell me about the services that you have here and how it relates to the senior center.
No, wait, we are the senior center.
Well, how Hancock House then?
No more to, this doesn't relate to Hancock House any more than it relates to Freedom Place, pardon me.
I see, okay.
Nor to Alicia Arms in Chester. And Alicia Arms in Chester is not under the same Section 8 housing, which makes a great difference. Also, the Overbrook Towers in Weirton, another high-rise for seniors. It is owned and operated under, or it is not owned, but it is operated under the city of Weirton's jurisdiction. So Alicia Arms is different, so is Overbrook Towers. But the Freedom Place, buildings 1 and 2, and Hancock House are under Section 8 federal housing, and are, their owner is George Conajohn, is the same person. And they, right now, there's Section 8 is not the same type of federal funding as it was before. You cannot get the buildings under the same category. But it is a wonderful product, and we got in toward the very last of them, and I'm very grateful for that.
So,
But anybody, the center here is under the Older Americans Act, and any person in this county that is 60 years old or older is eligible to any service that we have and can provide.
what services do you provide?
It's a hub of the centrally located for all federal programs. Now, we do not have the funds, but we get the information and can refer that to the place that it should be taken to achieve. We have about 10 or 11 particular services that we would have here. All centers operate a little differently. Here, because of the lack of transportation in our county, and because we are involved in two other states so close to us, it makes it very hard to keep away from transportation. So we have that for medical purposes, which we will then go into other states. But we can't travel Wheeling and Pittsburgh that distance beyond us because we don't have the staff nor the funding. But right now, in the years, we're seeing the people, there is no grocery store anywhere that will deliver to the household. So we have to take them there.
I noticed your van that takes the senior, is that the van that takes people shopping?
We have 4 vehicles on the road all the time.
Do you?
Yes. I lost one recently, and it was just worn out. But we need 2 more.
And so, how does that work?
They call in here their medical appointment. They call in having gotten it. We have them now up into February of 1993, already scheduled. When they call needing groceries, we sort of have to set the time at our convenience. Anyone in Weirton has a chance of going to anywhere they want in Weirton, whichever store, one store.
Really?
In here, they must go to their local place. Chester, the same thing. There's a large IGA there. Newell, since they don't have a large grocery of any sort, then they have a choice of we bring them either here or to Chester, whichever they. And the banking trips, those have to send her on once a month. But and the same with the groceries. But then my driver does the legwork for them, and they can get a lot of staple things that will. But in addition to that, then our outreach workers go out and take care of, find the people and their needs.
How many outreach workers do you have?
I have 1 full-time, 2 part-time.
And are those volunteers?
No.
No, they're paid. Okay. And you have a meals program here.
That's under a different federal program. We have it here. But the senior centers are under Title 3B of the Older Americans Act. And the nutrition is under Title 3C, so it is operated independently.
But you're responsible for that also?
Only the supervision of the one here.
Okay.
But not the hiring of, nor the providing of, or anything of the sort. I did provide the place, and also I have 1 full-time driver and 1 part-time driver. And that part-time driver has to be available on the hours that are needed for bringing in here.
Well, your schedule sounds pretty busy. Are you down here every day of the week?
Yes. Seldom miss any. We're open only Monday through Friday.
I'm really impressed.
Sometimes it's 7:30 when I come in here.
Oh my goodness. Well, that community involvement, the Boy Scouts, I hear you're involved with the church and the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I don't know how much use I am to any of those people, but I'm really involved in all of them. With Troop 38 here in New Cumberland.
Okay.
And that's for quite a number of years now. And I've often asked them, why in the world? Because I don't have any boys to be scouts. And they said, well, I take up a little bit of space when they have a meeting. So that seems to be one of the requisites of my job. And they change my title yearly. Every time that the new listing comes out, I usually have a new title on it. Sometimes I'm committee woman, or sometimes this and that, the other. But involved in it. And of course, I've been involved in my own church for, well, not seriously until I come back home to live.
Now, what church is that?
Presbyterian.
The Presbyterian Church.
And since coming back here and staying, not only become involved in the local church, but our presbytery, which is the Upper Ohio Valley Presbytery, which is a total of 90-some churches in the area.
All right. Does that involve traveling?
Yes. It depends on where the committee meetings are held. Last week it was Martins Ferry one night, the worst night in the week. Just rained a lot. As the name implies, it's all along the Ohio River, but it goes from north East Liverpool, Salineville, clear on down through New Martinsville to Marietta, and both sides of the river and back a ways. So that depends on what committees you're in, where they meet, according to, sometimes it's Wheeling, sometimes Martins Ferry, sometimes Steubenville, loads of places different. And then our little local Chamber of Commerce, we have few members, but we do keep things stirred up a little bit.
What kinds of projects would you like to see happen here? Do you have a pet project in New Cumberland that you would like to see happen? Or probably several.
Yes, I would like to see this section just beyond the intersection of 8 and 2 made into a beautiful little park. But not just made into a little beautiful park, but kept that way.
Would this involve the river?
Not necessarily. I think that the highways are, as we come down and to them, there's all that space that it could involve the river, but I think it'd be a big enough job if we just, for a small town, to try and have a lovely park there.
Would this be picnic tables or what?
No, I was thinking more of like a bird sanctuary or that type.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to get working on that.
Well, the thing that I see that so much is we can get something, but there's not the funds nor the manpower to keep it the way it should be. And that is my complete interest. I do not like to see anything achieved that cannot be maintained. I think there's so much needed, and too frequently we find the money to do something, but don't find the money to maintain.
So probably developing more of a volunteer corps to maybe do some work.
I think it takes more than a volunteer corps because maintenance costs money. And I think you've got to look at that more as much as with your main. That's one thing that I find that in our government programs, you can get funding, but you can't get funding to maintain anything. Your projects are all cut and dried.
Okay. Now, is there anything that you'd like to tell us that we absolutely should remember, that we may forget? Something about the town or the area that's been important to you?
Well, I noticed you looked a little surprised a while ago, and when I mentioned the word hoopy. And I think that should be a part of New Cumberland's to keep.
In what way now?
Well, since the term was originated here.
Oh, really? No, I don't know this. Okay.
And knowing the background on it, all the years that I was working away, I became acquainted with all of those little places in West Virginia that if you look on the wrong side of the road, you don't see it, because that's how small they are. The first oil well, as I understand, was at Cisco. But when the river traffic, now this I do not know, this is hearsay from the lady, but when I was mentioning all the river traffic coming up, everything coming by boat, people swarmed up here when the brickyards opened. And that's when the Prices and the Atkinsons and the various ones were stockholders and owners, as if my understanding is correct, with this People store. It was a company store. And the workers that came into a lot of these kills to work in the brickyards had probably never worked for money anywhere. If they had a good home at all, they didn't come here. But they would get on a steamer and come up here because they got hard cash to work in the kilns, hauling brick out of the kilns and storing them in the, at that time, the railroads, if that were, or on the boats, whatever was the traffic. As they applied for employment, they were asked where they had previously lived. And a lot of times there was very little of a mailing address. They were asked what jobs they had had before, and usually it was nothing. They were asked these questions. That was according to what I hear. That was Bud Atkinson's father, who was the paymaster, and the only thing that was identified as a job was that there were quite a few who came up and said they were hoop holers.
Hoop holders.
Holers.
Hope.
H-O-L-E-R-S, if they knew how to spell, which probably didn't, but they were hoop holers. I made it my point to visit that place one time to see what all was about, because the hoop holer was one who made the hoops that fastened onto the barrels, the barrel staves. They weren't trained enough to make the staves themselves that would hold it, but they could make these hoop holers, and they called themselves. The holes that strap that went around and stapled onto the barrel, and they were hoop holers. That became too much for them to keep on talking about, so it degenerated into hoopies.
All right.
And it is now a term which is still used, and the amusing thing is that when you go down south of Wheeling, anybody south of Wheeling is, from up in here, they still say, well, we go to down hoopy. Wheeling calls anything down below New Martinsville hoopy. You get down to Parkersburg and they say, what's that word? They don't know it at all. And that's the experience that I always found.
Oh, all right. That's interesting, because I remember hearing that as a young person, had no idea what it meant.
And I have a very good story that is true on that.
You don't want it on here?
I doubt if you do.
Okay. The house. I mean, you obviously love your house, your home.
Well, it means a lot to me, simply because I can more every day realize just what it meant to my father to build that, and to have it ready for his wife, and Of course, there's been many changes over the property in a number of years, and it takes quite a little bit to keep it up. But as long as I am living back here, I would feel a little mean if I didn't stay in that house. And the whole 15 rooms don't bother me a bit. I just live in them all.
Well, someday I would be very happy if you would invite us to come and see
Well,
your lovely house.
I will not let you in the 3rd floor
Okay.
because it is no longer livable. There are 3 rooms up there.
Uh-huh.
But no, it's just a plain old Victorian house.
Well, I think that the kind of workmanship that has gone into what you call a plain old Victorian house is something we can't do anymore.
There's so much of it that is solid that it couldn't be replaced for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Every window, every door, everything, the what you call them, but the decorations on every one are identical.
Oh.
All wood.
And your father was involved in the building of the house?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, what a treasure.
Mm-hmm.
We're developing a list of what we call landmark houses and landmark places. Could we include your house as one of those? It wouldn't mean that people would come to see it, but we could at least
I thought
make
it
a
had to be
designation.
100 years to be that.
No, different places can be, you can have different connotations. For the National Register, I think something has to be at least 50 years old. But I'm thinking in terms of local landmarks, because I think your house is a local landmark.